Before I became an activist in 1970, I was so boring. Hi, Glamour. I'm Jane Fonda, and the magazine has asked me to tell you the real story behind some of my headline-worthy life moments. I may not tell the truth. The film came out in 1968. I'm talking about Barbarella. My husband, the French-Russian film director Roger Vadim, directed it, and Terry Southern wrote the script. The President of the United States has assigned Barbarella, that's moi, the task of landing her spacecraft on the evil planet, which has been taken over by a terrible scientist. I've complicated feelings about the film. See, what I just said was the President of the United States chose Barbarella to fly her spaceship, which she did all by herself, to the planet. So that's kind of feminist, right? I'm the one that's going to rescue this planet from evilness. But then once I get there, it's all about making love and having strange sexual adventures. So there's that, which was a bit objectifying of me and a woman. So I had a little problem with the film because right after the film, I left my husband and came to the United States and slowly became a feminist. So I kind of, for a while, rejected the film Barbarella. When I regained my sense of humor, I watched the film and I thought, oh, and I grew fond of it and embraced it.
Yes, I must admit it was rather interesting.
In 1970, I was starting on a national tour of campuses around the country to raise money to support what became the Winter Soldier investigation. It was veterans from all branches of the military who were coming to Detroit to testify about war crimes. It was heavy duty. And as the plane flew from Windsor, Canada, where I made my first speech, into Cleveland, Ohio, the police arrested me. They told me they were under orders from the White House. That was the Nixon administration. The charge was drug smuggling. In fact, it was vitamin pills, but it took a few months to have the lab analyze them all and determine that they were, in fact, vitamins and not drugs, and the charges were dropped. But there were huge headlines, Fonda arrested for drug smuggling. It was a difficult, challenging time.
What inspired you to raise your fist for this program?
Why not? See, I have double-jointed hands, so it was very easy. I was, in fact, handcuffed, but it's very easy for me to slip my hands out of handcuffs, so I just threw a fist. This is when I got my first Oscar in 1972 for Klute. Red carpets and Oscars and things like that were very different than they are today. We did our own hair and makeup, and nobody said, "What are you wearing?" because we just wore our own clothes. I wore a black wool suit with a Mao collar as a kind of form of protest. The war was still going on in Vietnam. I had a raging fever. I think I had the flu at the time. And I was very uncertain about what I would say when I won. I kind of knew I was going to win. It was in the zeitgeist. And I asked my father, what should I say? And he said, just say there's a lot to be said tonight, but now's not the time. And that's exactly what I said.
There's a great deal to say, and I'm not going to say it tonight. I would just like to really thank you very much.
The Oscars are important to an actor. It's your peers that are voting. It means that they admire you and think you did a good job, so it means a lot. It doesn't always, but it can mean that you'll get hired more. It didn't mean that in my case at the time because I was so controversial that, in fact, I wasn't hired very much. But it's an evening of tremendous tension if you're nominated, and it meant a lot to me. I won a second Oscar for my role in Coming Home, and it was extremely meaningful to me. Well, I was pregnant with my second child. I started developing a movie about the war. I had been, for years, meeting with active duty soldiers and Vietnam veterans in VA hospitals and in their homes and talking to their wives. And I wanted to make a movie about what I had heard, what I had learned, and that became Coming Home. So the Oscar, I didn't think I was going to win that year. I had been trying to get the Oscars to do closed captioning so that the deaf community could participate, could hear, and they refused. And so I I didn't think I was going to win, but I memorized what I was going to say should it happen. And then I worked with somebody to learn how to say that in sign language. So I actually received my second Oscar in sign language.
Over 14 million people are deaf. They are the invisible handicapped and can't share this evening. So this is my way of acknowledging them.
In 1982, I released the first Jane Fonda workout video. The only home videos that existed at that time were home improvement videos, and they were produced and released by a man named Stuart Carl. And Stuart Carl kept asking me to turn the workout into a video because I had opened a workout studio, and I said no. And then because all the money from the workout was going to an organization called the Campaign for Economic Democracy, maybe if I did the videos, it would make more money and I would have more money for the organization. So eventually, when Stuart Carl kept coming back and asking me to do a video, I said, okay. I remember I wrote the script sitting on a hotel room floor, and we did our own hair and makeup. Never imagined it would become a big deal. Didn't understand it would fill a need that people didn't even know they had. There were so many reasons that women all over the world wanted to be able to work out in the safety and affordability of their homes. I'm very proud that my first video became the #1 video and remains the #1 home video of all time. It's 2005 here, and I have come back to Hollywood to play opposite Jennifer Lopez in Monster-in-Law. You see, 15 years earlier, I fell in love with and married Ted Turner, the man who founded CNN and Cartoon Network and Turner Classic Movies, and he was a handful. We split up after a decade, and I wrote my memoirs. So that made 15 years that I hadn't been working. And I was 62 years old. And I thought, well, you don't come back after 15 years hiatus at the age of 62. But this movie came along. It was the only strategic thing I've ever done in my career. I read the script, it wasn't very good. And I thought, yeah, but that character is pretty spicy. That's a good character. It's way better than J-Lo's character. And people are gonna come to see J-Lo and they're gonna discover Jane Fonda. We got the script improved and we made the movie and it became a huge hit. I always enjoy physical comedy. I enjoyed doing that. I loved playing that character, and I loved working with Jennifer. She's a very cool lady and we had a lot of fun. 2015, and Lily Tomlin and I have just started working on Grace and Frankie, which has become the longest running comedy on Netflix. I met Lily first about a year before we made 9 to 5. I saw her in a one-woman show she was doing called Appearing Nightly, and I was just bowled over by her brilliance. And I said to myself, I'm not going to make a movie about secretaries unless Lily Tomlin's in it. And so we became friends over 9 to 5. And then over the years, we stayed friends, we stayed in touch, and we were very happy that we could reunite again. And since we wrapped the final season of Grace and Frankie, we've done 2 movies together. Moving on, and one of them is called 80 for Brady, which we're filming right now. This is 2020 and my Fire Drill Fridays. In 2019, I was getting more and more depressed because I knew that although I had tried to make my home as carbon-proof as possible, reduce my footprint on the planet, I knew that I wasn't doing enough. I have a platform, and Grace and Frankie has certainly helped with that. And I didn't feel that I was using it to the maximum. And I read a book by one of my heroes, Naomi Klein, and the way she wrote about the science and the way she wrote about Greta Thunberg lit me up. I just knew I wanted to move to Washington, D.C. This was the fall of 2019. And do something that would raise a ruckus and garner attention. And so I called the director of Greenpeace USA, Annie Leonard, and together we decided it would be Fire Drill Fridays, and that every Friday I would hold a rally in front of the White House, in front of the Capitol, and then engage in civil disobedience where we would be risking arrest. I celebrated my 82nd birthday in jail because I knew that would garner a lot of attention, and it did. People began coming from all over the country. My goal was not to try to move the politicians. My goal was to move people who were concerned about the environment from concern to action, and then to civil disobedience. Civil disobedience and risking arrest is a great way to change things, and it was very successful. And then COVID hit. And so we took it virtual. We began doing it every Friday over Zoom. We had 9 million people watching us in 2020 and becoming activists, writing their elected officials and so forth, and we continue to this day. I have launched the Jane Fonda Climate PAC, which is aimed at getting rid of politicians who are in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry and replacing them with climate champions. Because the fossil fuel industry has a stranglehold over our government, and we have to end that. Well, over the years, what we've seen is that really important legislation to reduce carbon emissions has been stalled because of politicians that are beholden to the fossil fuel industry. So we have to get rid of these people who will not act independent of the fossil fuel industry, and replace them with people who understand that we are facing an existential crisis and we have 8 years left. What the climate scientists are telling us unanimously is that we have to cut our carbon emissions in half by 2030. And if we don't, we're going to reach a tipping point, at which point ecosystems begin to collapse and it's beyond our control. There'll be nothing we can do about it. And our lives as human beings depend on these ecosystems, oceans, forests, the Arctic, and so forth. So we are the generation, the last generation that can actually save ourselves and save the planet. The decisions that we make can do that, because after us, it's going to be too late if we don't do it. Living takes energy. Working, being on a photo shoot takes energy, and it can kind of wear you down. Activism lifts your spirit. Whenever I'm depressed, if I take action, the depression subsides. Thank you, Glamour, for letting me set the record straight.